In today's video, we're going to have a lot of fun with a whole lot of these.
But to tell you the full story, we're gonna have to go back in time.
I've never done anything like this before, but basically, in front of me is a somewhat small box. But apparently that box is full of these. Now, you guys know that I like to go on eBay and look at weird and wacky listings, and when I saw a box of 57 iPhone 4s, the first thing that came into my mind was, I gotta have this. Holy moly. Have you ever seen anything like this in your life? I guess let's take these out of the box and stack them. Oh, screens are coming on. This one had a charger icon. Oh, all of them have worked. I see some dead pixels here on the screen. Oh, this one's turning on. Let's see if it's okay. So these are not wiped. And I just saw something that I wish I did not see. So moving on, this is just ridiculous. This is a ridiculous video. What am I doing? I have to charge and clean all 57 of these iPhones. So I think what I'm gonna do is set up a tripod with my iPhone on time lapse, and I'm just gonna start charging and cleaning. And hopefully some of them will work. So I'll see you guys later. Testing all of these iPhones with dead batteries took a good couple of days, but by the end of it, I found that only 8 of the phones were completely non-functional, and of the rest, there were 25 that were activation locked and 21 that were fully functional, and I was able to restore to factory settings without any issue. But it was becoming quite clear that if I was gonna get anywhere interesting with this project, I was gonna need some help. So I talked to my friend Noah, who has worked with me on a number of projects, and we started coming up with a couple of ideas. We wondered if there was a way to combine our small army of iPhones to work together and create something more magical than the sum of their parts. So over the winter holidays this past year, Noah started building an app. But then, nothing. The project sort of stalled out. In the middle of January, I was working on moving studios, and the project just kind of fell to the wayside. But then we had an idea. So there's just one problem. We've decided that 57 iPhones or 48 working iPhones, it's just not enough.
So we decided to buy 54 more iPhones.
And now we're gonna open them. Oh my god. This literally is shipped like drugs.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I have to say, I'm a little bit desensitized since the first batch of iPhones.
Yeah, I agree.
It's still a crazy thing, but like...
I'm like, 54, no big deal.
Been there, done that.
I got one. Ooh, that's in good condition.
That's actually the nicest condition out of all of the ones I've seen so far.
Yeah, and that's a lot, because it was at least 57. With this many iPhones, we could start our own, like, iPhone business.
Yeah.
A really, really bad business.
We could be like a carrier, and the deal is you buy a plan, you get a free iPhone 4 for it.
Okay, this one's cracked. We've got a crack on the back.
All right.
They're also mostly the black models, which is interesting, because the other batch, the 57 batch, was mostly white. These are now mostly black, which I have to say I prefer. So there you have it, folks. 54 more iPhones.
As if we really needed any more.
This is so stupid. Why do we do this? So the thing is, the listing which was so cheap, $230 for 54 iPhones. How much is that per iPhone? $4.24 per iPhone, which is not bad, but apparently the catch is that these are mostly or entirely iCloud locked.
Yeah.
So it's gonna take a long time to unlock all of these phones.
Yeah.
It's doable. Noah's done it. How long does it take per iPhone?
Yeah, so we have a way to unlock them, and we've done some testing with that. There's two parts though. You gotta remove the iCloud, but then if you want to actually use them with iTunes or Xcode or anything like that, you have to activate them. And the activation has to be done every time the phone restarts because it loses the activation status. So unlocking them takes 5 minutes per phone if you're really in the rhythm. And then the activation's maybe another 5 minutes. So it's not too bad, but when you add it up, 54 and we have another 48 or whatever, it's gonna take a while.
Well, let's get to it then. The main issue that we faced was not repairability. iPhone 4 and 4Ss are very easy to get inside and work on because they don't have seals for water tightness like later iPhones do. iFixit's guides are thorough and comprehensive, and they're really quite easy to follow. But the issue here was getting around the two-step process to actually install our app, starting with an iCloud bypass.
So this is how you bypass an iCloud-locked iPhone 4S. If you want to see an in-depth step-by-step tutorial, you should check out AppleTech752's video, which we have linked below. He's been a huge help throughout this entire process, so big shout out to him. Definitely check out his channel if you're interested in this kind of stuff. So here we have one of many iCloud-locked iPhone 4Ss, and the first thing we're going to do to bypass that is we're going to plug it into the computer, and then we're going to put it into DFU mode. To do that, I'm going to hold down the home and lock buttons until the phone turns off, and then I'm going to wait about 3 extra seconds. Then I'm going to release the lock button, but leave the home button pressed for about 5 to 10 seconds. As you can see, we get a pop-up on the Mac that it found an iPhone in recovery mode, so we can close out of that, and now we're in DFU mode over here. Next, we're going to plug the iPhone into an Arduino that's running a special exploit program. So I'm going to unplug from the computer and plug in to the Arduino. Now I'm going to go ahead and plug the Arduino into my computer. So as you can see, the exploit has started running, and finally it just finished. So now we can unplug the iPhone from the Arduino, and we can unplug the Arduino from the Mac. Now we're going to use AppleTech752's tool called Sliver. So I'm going to go into A5 devices and iPhone 4S. I'm gonna go ahead and choose the alternate RAM disk here because the standard one doesn't really work for me. And I'm gonna hit load. As you can see, we get another pop-up, which you can ignore. Over here in my terminal, it says successfully uploaded file. So I'm gonna follow these instructions. I'm going to disconnect the iPhone for 5 seconds and then reconnect it and click continue. Again, it successfully transferred the rest of the data. We get some cool text on here, and now we get this little loading bar. All we need to do is click on Relay Device Info, and then click on Delete Setup.app. And that's it. The phone is now rebooting, and when it turns on, the setup app will be gone and will be in. So in about 3 minutes, I was able to completely remove the iCloud lock from this iPhone 4S. Now we just have to do that 50 more times.
Over the next couple of days, Noah worked on a method for getting the phones activated, because the problem is even once you remove the iCloud lock and get into the phone, you can't install an application on it because it's not actually activated.
Okay, that's good.
During this time, he was also working on the application that would eventually be installed on all of our devices. And while Noah was working on those things, I whipped out the iFixit Protect toolkit and did some repairs on the few devices that actually needed to have some parts swapped. So what you're seeing here is me switching the good logic board from a phone with a bad display into the good display of a phone with a bad logic board. This is a lot easier than switching the display itself because it's really hard to get those out. So doing a logic board swap with the Protect toolkit is much easier. I even decided to do a cheeky bezel swap to put the white back on the black bezels, which I think looks better. So at this point, our project was really coming along. Despite the fact that we were dealing with over 100 iPhones, things were going pretty well. But then there was a problem.
So the problem is, for all of the iCloud locked iPhones, we have to do another step to activate them. And if the phones die, they lose the activation and we have to do it again. So we want to keep 70 of our 100 iPhones powered at all times.
And what better way to do that than with a 40-port USB charger and 50 30-pin cables that we got for, what was it, like 15 bucks?
Yeah.
So we're gonna plug in 40 iPhones and charge them all at the same time. Let's go. And now I present to you 40 iPhones being charged at once. All right, we are in the home stretch here. This is our last step, or I guess it's really multiple steps, but we've come up with a system. Basically, we have two piles. The smaller pile here are phones that we didn't have to bypass the iCloud lock, so all we have to do is put the application on those. These phones, we did have to bypass the lock, which now need to be activated in order to install the app. So the first step is they'll go over to Noah.
And I'm going to put them in DFU mode. Then I'm going to plug them into the Arduino to put them in pwned DFU mode. Then they'll go back into the computer so that I can use the sliver tool to get them ready to be activated. Then they're going to go over to this Mac that's running Windows 10, where we're going to run the activation script to activate them. And then finally they'll go over to this Mac that it will load the app onto them.
So it's a lot of steps, but hopefully with a little bit of teamwork and our little assembly line, we'll be able to get these done pretty quickly. Let's get to it.
All right.
With all the iPhones activated and the app installed, it was time to set everything up in a test grid to work on our big reveal. Alright, so unfortunately, we can't seem to get... We wanted to do a 9 by 10 grid here, but we can't get these things to join the Wi-Fi. They just won't do it. So we're gonna have to remove, we had like 14 or 15 that won't join, and we're gonna figure out what grid size we can get to work with the ones that are actually gonna connect to the internet. Even though we already gave up on getting a full 10 by 10 grid with all 100 iPhones, we were still having a lot of issues.
On some of the phones, the app would crash randomly and then refuse to open up again. And for other phones, the entire phone would just crash. We weren't sure why. Maybe it had to do with the activation hack that we were using, but it was incredibly frustrating.
One of our guesses was that maybe the certificate used to sign the app had expired and wasn't working and was causing the app to crash, but it was a whole mess. It seemed like once we had our final grid, less than half of them were actually launching the app. It was pretty terrible. So what we ended up having to do was basically go back to square one. Fortunately, we didn't have to repeat the iCloud bypass step because that would have just added hours to it, but we did have to activate a number of the phones again, as well as reinstall the app on everything.
Which was honestly fine because I had made some tweaks to it, so I had to do it anyways.
We did all of that stuff off camera because, frankly, we were exhausted, and we set all of our phones up in the final grid pattern for our big reveal. Now, it's at this point that you're probably wondering what exactly you would do with 100 iPhones. I'm awake! I'm awake! I get it! I'm awake! I can't believe how intense this game of war is. We have a double tie. All right, are you ready? We got a triple deal.
1, 2, 3.
Oh my God, you won with the 5! You won with the 5!
Yes!
Ah.
Give it! Oh yeah! Oh, yes!
So this project has been 9 months in the making. Now, granted, we weren't working on it continuously for 9 months. That would be insane. But it was one of those projects that takes a long time, so we kept putting it off because, it's hard to find a block of time where you can just sit and iCloud bypass 75 iPhones. But weirdly enough, it wasn't actually that expensive of a project because the fact that we ordered iCloud locked phones meant they were super cheap, so the whole project cost about the same as an iPhone 12 mini. But we definitely paid for it in our time and sanity because really the majority of this project was spent on getting around the iCloud lock. Apple makes it so annoying for these 10-year-old phones that had basically been thrown away and just kind of condemned to death. I mean, how long do you think it would have taken with normal, not locked iPhones? How long did it take you to make the app?
The app was, I don't know, a couple weeks on and off.
Yeah, and like spare time in the evenings.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really that complicated of a project. It was just having to do all of these steps to keep them unlocked and get the app to work on all of it. Granted, we did run into some issue trying to connect 100 iPhones to our Wi-Fi network here at the office. That we probably should have saw it coming. Do you guys have any idea how difficult it is to keep 100 10-year-old iPhones charged? I mean, they all have varying degrees of battery degradation. So some of them you could leave for like a couple of weeks and they would sit on standby just fine. But some of them would die overnight or in a couple of hours. And remember, when they died, it introduced all sorts of complications. We had to reactivate or reinstall the app again. And just the age of the iPhones was really a major factor.
Yeah, especially for me, because when I was developing my app, I couldn't use the latest version of Xcode and, you know, all of that stuff because these iPhones are running versions of iOS that are long outdated and long unsupported by Apple. So I had to do a couple of gymnastics to get a development environment where I could write the app and then deploy it on these old phones.
Didn't you have to make like an El Cap, a virtual machine with like the worst graphical interface and terrible frame rate?
Yes, it was not the pinnacle of productivity, but...
So yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend taking on a project like this for yourself unless you find phones that aren't locked. But from a repair standpoint, this was actually a pretty doable project. So iFixit sponsored it thinking that we would have a lot of repairs to do, but most of the reason that these phones were sold off so cheap is not because they were broken, but because they were, I guess, software broken. Like, we only had a handful of phones that wouldn't boot up. Actually, the most common issue was stuck lock buttons. That's a big issue on these. And so I did replace a couple of those with the ProTech toolkit, which is great because it has all the tiny, tiny, tiny little screws that you need to get into these things, like the pentalobes and the T2 screws. It's a bit of a mess to work on these things, but fortunately we didn't have to do too many because physically they were all in pretty good condition. There was only one bad display. There were, I would say, less than 10 that wouldn't boot up or would boot loop. And then we had a couple of swollen batteries after the fact, but none of those actually damaged the device itself because they just blow out the back glass and then you just replace the battery on the back glass, which is a pretty simple fix. So at least on the hardware side, it was a pretty manageable project, but Noah had quite a bit of fun actually working on the app, apart from the whole activation thing.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience, and I'm glad that Luke allowed me to borrow these iPhones because I certainly wouldn't have bought them for myself.
And you would have been smart not to.
Yeah. Now, if you're curious about how the app actually works, I'll let you in on a little secret. Okay, the phones don't actually connect and communicate with each other. They all connect to a server that I wrote that runs on my laptop. The reason I did this is because it would make the phones much easier to control. I could just type a command into my laptop and it would send it to all of the phones. Oh my God. I built the app on a solid foundation and made the features modular so that if I wanted to add more in the future, I could do so pretty easily. If you want to learn more about the technical details of the app, you can check out the companion video over on my channel where I'll explain things in depth. The link is in the description below.
And definitely make sure to subscribe to Noah's channel so you can catch his bi-yearly upload schedule. So that is the 100 iPhone project. Let me know in the comments below if you think it was a good idea. I'll let you in on a little secret. It was not. I think it was a really fun project, but oh my god, do not buy iCloud locked iPhones. Just don't do it. It's not worth the trouble. It's just not. So let us know in the comments below what you think the coolest part of Noah's app was. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one.
Bye.